This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Andry Rajoelina projected as Madagascar's incoming president. The Nigerian army regroups after Boko Haram ambush. And the Great Lakes and SADC leaders will meet with the DRC president ahead of Sunday's election. Hello everyone, welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories and others in just a moment, but first, Uche Okoronko with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. MTN shares up 8% after its settlement agreement with the Central Bank of Nigeria. And the US stocks record the highest daily gain in almost a decade. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And let's start with the election period here in Africa. Madagascar's Independent National Election Commission is due to announce full provisional results following last week's presidential election runoff. Results published on Wednesday morning show that 99.32% of polling stations indicate that Andry Rajoelina won with over 2.5 million votes, or 55.57%, while Marc Ravalomanana garnered just over 2 million votes, or 44.43%. After Thursday's announcement, the country's high constitutional courts will have another 8 days to determine whether they agree with the provisional results, and their final decision will be made before January the 4th, 2019. Well, it is the first time the two candidates have faced each other at the ballot box, but their rivalry has dominated life on the island for years. Here's a look at their profiles.
Both former mayors, both former presidents, both self-made, both incredibly wealthy. But the history between these two is a bitter one. Marc Ravalomanana was forced from power in 2009 and forced into exile following a coup led by Andry Rajoelina. The standoff cast Madagascar into political and economic turmoil, and the two were banned from running in the 2013 election thanks to pressure from the international community. 5 years on, this election shows they have lost little of their popular support, nor has their relationship improved. Ravalomanana has cast Rajoelina as a destroyer. Rajoelina has dismissed Ravalomanana as too old to revive Madagascar. Both have pitched big plans should they win. Rajoelina's promises include solar power for every home on the island and to have cow theft, one of Madagascar's priority crimes. Ravalomanana is promising free education up to 16 years and universal healthcare. They both know their electorate, the electorate know them. Voters are hoping not just that the winner can deliver, but that the loser can accept the result. Penina Karibe, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
The chief of the Nigerian Army, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, has paid a visit to troops in the northeastern region that were ambushed by Boko Haram militants earlier in the week. 13 people died as a result, and a statement from the army said the attackers ambushed a military convoy on a highway linking the capital of Borno State with Damaturu in neighboring Yobe State. The attack followed an attempted raid on a nearby military base along the highway that was repelled by the troops. The Maiduguri-Damaturu highway has seen repeated attacks, including raids on military bases and markets. So far, the 9-year-long Boko Haram insurgency has killed 27,000 people, displaced 2 million more, and heightened tensions in the region.
The number of casualties that normally occur in this circumstance or in the first scenario are normally very high, because by the time you jump out from your trench, you will discover that you are exposed. You are completely exposed and you become an easy target.
Well, let's get you more on that story now. CGTN's Deji Badmus is joining us live from Lagos. Deji, the army in Nigeria is regrouping now after the ambush by Boko Haram. What has been said about the recovery plan to gain the upper hand against the militants?
Well, in respect of that attack, what we have been told, and that's the information that the army has put out, is that it is still trying to carrying out search and rescue operation. And when it says search and rescue operation, it means it is still looking for possibly for men of the Nigerian military that may have been killed or just got lost, during that attack. So other than that, nothing has come forward yet. So that's basically what's going on now with that operation. In terms of what the military is doing to gain the upper hand, it's basically why the Chief of Army Staff, that's the head of the military now, has been touring the northeast of the country, meeting with troops now to boost their morale and to communicate new strategies to them. Even the Chief of Defense Staff has been to the northeast of the country too in the past few days and has actually met with troops. We understand the Nigerian military is coming up with a different strategy now to take the attack now to the Boko Haram insurgents and not just wait to continue to repel attacks. And just yesterday, another attack happened, apart from this one that we're talking about. Another attack happened. The military just announced it today. This time it was a division now of the multinational joint task force that was attacked. Their headquarters in a place known as Baga, and one Navy personnel was killed in that attack. But of course, the military says its troops now succeeded in repelling the attack and that they are still going after the insurgents. So, we seem to be having this frequency now in attacks, especially targeted at military formations. It's just up to the commanders, especially the head of the Nigerian military now, to come up with a new strategy to halt this series of attacks that we've had. And that's exactly what they say they're trying to do, communicating this new strategy, even though they're not disclosing much. Beatrice?
Deji, on that frequency of the attacks, though, the northern parts of Nigeria are still plagued by heavy fighting. Now, with elections not too far away in 2019, is there a plan to ensure safety in those parts?
Absolutely, and I wouldn't use those words, heavy fighting, because what we've had, you could just call sporadic violence. You have these violent attacks coming up intermittently. It's not as if there's consistent fighting going on, especially in the northeast of the country. And other than the northeast of the country, of course, in the northwest of Nigeria, especially in that state called Zamfara, there was an attack there a few days ago. 17 persons were killed by armed bandits now, cattle rustlers, if you like. And the Nigerian government says it is giving these bandits now a last warning, and that it would no longer tolerate any form of killing at all in that state. Now, what we have seen in the past few weeks and months, if you like, is that there's been massive deployment of military personnel, not just to the northeast of the country, but to the northwest of the country, especially in those places in the north where you continue to have these sporadic violence. But unfortunately, in a state like Zamfara, where we've seen massive deployment of troops, we still continue to have attacks like the one we had just a few days ago, where 17 persons were killed. So it appears, well, the situation has not been brought completely under control, but the government says it will do everything to ensure that there's stability in that region so that election can take place. I wouldn't put it beyond this government to be able to achieve that, because we've seen it happen in the past, and I think the government will do everything it can to ensure that elections there are peaceful and that the elections take place, because it just would not make sense at all if that part of the country is cut off because the president is actually popular in that part of the country, and I want to believe he would do everything to ensure that there's peace there and that the elections take place there. So,
Deji, just a clarification here. The government has spoken on trying to stabilize parts of the country that has sporadic fighting. But has the army improved its communication, though, since the disputed numbers of army casualties last month?
Well, to a certain extent, I would say yes. For instance, the army has been forthcoming now in terms of casualty figure. The attack that happened yesterday, it was quick to come out, you know, to tell us how many persons were killed. In that attack that happened, that's the ambush too. It was very quick in coming out now to tell the entire country how many soldiers lost their life now in that attack. So there's some change, but of course, as you would expect with anything to do with security, you wouldn't expect that, you know, they would want to disclose everything to the public. Of course, they would cite national security sometimes for not disclosing everything. But there's been a slight improvement, I must confess, a slight improvement. But, you know, you never can tell. We just have to wait and see for how long these, you know, the improvement now would last, if the military will continue to maintain it, and if it will become the new normal, if you like.
All right, Deji Badmus for us there in Lagos. Thank you. The International Conference on Great Lakes Region, ICGLR, and the Southern African Development Commission have expressed their concerns over the violence and delays in the Democratic Republic of Congo's elections. The regional governing blocs are expected to meet the DRC President Joseph Kabila this Thursday in a bid to ensure a stable electoral process. Leon Sinyange has more.
Wednesday's meeting by the regional organizations called on the DRC government to hold a peaceful and transparent election. Delegates from the ICGLR and SADC were hosted in the Congo-Brazzaville by President Denis Sassou Nguesso. The meeting also included presidents of Namibia, Angola, Zambia and Botswana. The DRC was not represented. The heads of state expressed their concerns over the violent acts that have marked the election campaign. A delegation composed of Congolese and Zambian foreign ministers will now meet in Kinshasa to discuss further with President Kabila about the election scheduled for December the 30th. Over 40 million Congolese are expected to go to the polls this Sunday. The leading candidates are ruling parties Emmanuel Ramazani Shadari and the opposition's Martin Fayulu as well as Felix Tshisekedi. The electoral body will announce presidential results on January the 15th. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
And now to Sudan, where the country's top Islamist party is calling for a probe into the death of protesters. Demonstrators have been taking to the streets frustrated by the high cost of living. The country's economy has faced multiple challenges with a current inflation rate of 70%. President Omar al-Bashir has pledged to undertake reforms to better the lives of citizens. The ruling party stated it understands the anger over the current economic situation, but its spokesman alleged foreign powers were behind the protest. Opposition figures put the death toll at 22 protesters, a number the government disputed. You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Liberia reflects on 1 year under the leadership of George Weah.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest minds in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, on the 22nd of January 2018, former football star George Weah was sworn in as the 25th president of Liberia. He took over from Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who had led the country for over 12 years after years of civil war. Let's take a look at Weah's days in office.
For George Weah, the swearing-in ceremony was a culmination of long-held dreams. Dreams that were nurtured on football pitches and solidified in a presidential contest marked by a runoff. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was handing over power to a man she had beaten in 2005. She had led the West African nation for over 12 years as it emerged from years of civil wars that shocked the world. However, there was no time for Ellen Johnson Sirleaf to steer the country to economic recovery. George Weah had promised jobs and economic prosperity, which ended up being his ticket to power. He beat his predecessor's preferred choice, Joseph Boakai. Now it's almost a year later and things are not as rosy. Weah's administration has been battling corruption. The disappearance of currencies worth almost $100 million in September highlighted the depth of the vice. The nation's 4.6 million youths account for 60% of the population, and unemployment is still high. Poverty also remains a challenge for the new government. Liberia ranks at number 177 out of a total of 188 in the UNDP's Human Development Index. The country relies heavily on rubber and iron ore exports, but these sectors are still battling for that breakthrough. As the population awaits for the magic pass from the former football star, the coming new year could just be the beginning of yet another tough march. Liberia's economic recovery, if achieved, will definitely be the ultimate trophy for George Weah. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
U.S. President Donald Trump has made a surprise visit to American troops in Iraq with First Lady Melania Trump. This was Trump's first trip to a conflict zone in nearly 2 years of his presidency. His visit has angered Iraqi politicians who termed it a violation of the country's sovereignty.
The U.S. president posing for selfies with troops at the joint base al-Assad west of Baghdad, smiling for the cameras after orchestrating a major military shakeup in Washington. His address was to the U.S. troops, but his message was directed at the world at large.
America shouldn't be doing the fighting for every nation on earth, not being reimbursed in many cases at all. So we're not the suckers of the world. We're no longer the suckers, folks. We've been fighting for a long time in Syria. Now it's time for our troops to come back home.
The visit comes just days after Trump announced a sudden withdrawal of 2,000 U.S. troops from Syria. At the military base, Trump strongly defended his Syria pullout while promising to stay put in Iraq.
While maintaining the U.S. presence in Iraq to prevent an ISIS resurgence and to protect U.S. interests, and also to always watch very closely over any potential reformation of ISIS, and also to watch over Iran. We'll be watching.
But Iraqi opposition leaders were not too pleased about the U.S. president's visit, reminding him that the U.S. occupation of Iraq ended long ago. In fact, Trump did not meet any Iraqi officials during his 3-hour visit. A planned meeting with Iraqi Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi was scrapped due to a dispute over the venue of the discussions. So the two leaders spoke instead on the phone. Donald Trump ran for the presidency, promising an end to nearly 2 decades of American military interventions. But the U.S. still has significant presence in a number of global war zones. There are around 14,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan, 5,000 in Iraq, 800 troops in Niger, 500 in Somalia, and an undisclosed number in Libya and Yemen. Although the Trump administration is planning to withdraw around 7,000 troops from Afghanistan, Many analysts question Trump's decision to leave U.S.-initiated wars midway. Despite being a major player in the Syrian war not so long ago, Trump says reconstruction of the war-torn country isn't America's problem.
We're not nation building. Rebuilding Syria will require a political solution, and it's a solution that should be paid for by its very rich neighboring countries, not the United States.
Till now, Trump's Middle East policy has focused on cornering Iran by imposing economic sanctions. But by pulling out, experts believe the U.S. has handed out a free pass to Iran in Syria. So what really is America's endgame in the region? Or is it just about Trump's gut, after all? With Nyan Seth, Daniel Plafker for CGTN.
Meanwhile, American emergency workers are beginning to screen every migrant minor in U.S. custody. This comes after the death of a second detained child this month. An 8-year-old boy died Monday while he and his father were in the custody of U.S. border agents. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commission warned Wednesday that the agency was unable to cope with the hundreds of arrivals. Some U.S. lawmakers angrily denounced the Trump administration's immigration policy. Guatemala has called for an investigation into the boy's death, which came just 3 weeks after a 7-year-old girl died from the country died in similar circumstances.
Because of the poverty that people are migrating away from here, there are no opportunities. The poverty we live in, the crops we grow, aren't enough to support a family.
Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko has announced an end to 30 days of martial law to allow elections to go ahead in March. Poroshenko imposed a martial law in Russian-speaking regions of the country after Russia seized Ukrainian ships in the Black Sea.
We have significantly boosted the air defenses of our southern and eastern regions, and we have sped up the delivery of weapons and equipment by 2 or 3 months to the Army. The first group of reservists has been mobilized and received initial training.
On November the 26th, the Russian Coast Guard fired at and seized 3 Ukrainian ships and their crews. The 24 seamen remain in Russian custody. Poroshenko announced new sanctions against those allegedly involved in the incident. The sanctions cover a large number of Russian parliamentary deputies. Opponents of the deeply unpopular Ukrainian leader had accused him of imposing martial law so he could postpone the presidential election scheduled for March the 31st. Japan is drawing flack from anti-whaling countries after its announcement it was withdrawing from the International Whaling Commission. Brazil called Tokyo's decision a great regression. Australia said it was regrettable and urged Tokyo to reconsider. Japan's withdrawal from the IWC will take effect on June the 30th, clearing the way to restart commercial whaling in July. An official said the hunts would be limited to Japan's territorial waters and Japanese whaling ships would no longer go to the Antarctic. Our correspondent Owen Poland reports on the response in New Zealand.
It's images like this of whales being hunted and killed by Japan in the name of scientific research that has angered many nations and conservation groups. So Japan's decision to end whaling in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary is a cause for celebration.
I think it should be a celebration for the whales of the world that, they now have half the world is going to be protected, and that's got to be a great thing.
The Sea Shepherd Conservation Society has fought for 13 years to stop hunting in the Antarctic Southern Ocean, and in one famous incident, their protest vessel was crushed between 2 Japanese fishing boats. However, the group now believes that Japan's departure from the International Whaling Commission could lead to the formation of a new whale sanctuary in the South Atlantic Ocean.
There's a very real chance, almost certain, that we'll now have an Atlantic whale sanctuary. So we're going to have the whole southern hemisphere will be a protected area for whales, and that's got to be great news for the whales of the world.
However, the political response hasn't been so positive, and members of the International Whaling Commission are now trying to assess the implications of Japan's decision to resume commercial whaling for the first time in 30 years. The New Zealand government has welcomed Japan's decision to cease whaling in the Southern Ocean, but says it's disappointed by the move to leave the International Whaling Commission. New Zealand says that whaling is an outdated and unnecessary practice, and it hopes that Japan will cease all whaling to protect ocean ecosystems. Japan is legally entitled to hunt for whales within its own 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, and the Japanese government says it will promote the sustainable use of aquatic resources. It also says that it will only hunt for species with healthy populations, but conservation groups are worried.
They could target quite endangered species like blue, fin and sign whales, so that is a little bit of a negative, but at least they're now contained to their own territory and they're not going 14,000 kilometres across the other side of the world to where a whale sanctuary is.
And while Japan argues that fish stocks have recovered enough to resume commercial hunts, it seems that the rest of the world wants these creatures of the deep to be left in peace. Owen Poland, CGTN, Auckland.
Well, let's now go to Uche Okoronkwo for a look at the day's business news. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, MTN shares up 8% after its settlement agreement with the Central Bank of Nigeria, and US stocks record the highest daily gain in almost a decade.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. See, business in Africa is high risk. After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN. Now in South Africa, shares in telecoms giant MTN jumped 8% today. This is after it settled a row with Nigeria's central bank for about $52.6 million of the $8.1 billion which it had threatened to cost. Now the case centered on allegations that dividends paid by the firm between 2007 and 2015 were based on improperly issued certificates. The terms of the deal were a positive surprise for investors, even with the company and officials having signaled that a resolution was still likely. Now, MTN has had persistent run-ins with authorities in Nigeria as it chases big sales growth opportunities in the country. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones Industrial Average in the U.S. surged at least 1,000 points in a single session for the first time in a broad stock rebound on Wednesday. This also saw the S&P 500 post its biggest one-day percentage gain in more than 9 years, and that's after the benchmark index was on the brink of a bear market. Now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose over 1,000 points, or 4.99%, to 22,878.65. The S&P 500 gained 116.63 points, or 4.96%, while the Nasdaq Composite added 361.44 points, or 5.84%.
The market now, first of all, is just exhausted from all the headlines in Washington, and I think also a bit exhausted from all the tax law selling that we've seen over the course of December. So hopefully this is the beginning of a stabilization process, with markets saying, okay, we've priced in enough uncertainty and enough tax loss selling that we're pretty good through the end of the year.
Now, despite the surge we saw on Wednesday, the S&P 500 index was on pace for its biggest percentage decline in December since the Great Depression. Just a few months ago, reports were saying that the American stock market had ushered in the longest bull market ever, more than 3,000 days. Now, as CGTN's John Terrett wraps up, 2018 has been quite a volatile year.
Meet our guide to US stock prices in 2018. Not very talkative, I grant you, but packed with information nonetheless. It's one of the digital big boards on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Take a look at the big board, and on the right-hand side, in red, you see VIX. That's the volatility index, or the fear index. And there's been a lot of fear in 2018.
Broker Peter Tuchman, who, unlike the big board, is very talkative, explains why.
Three most important, and I think the first one to rattle the market, were the problems with China trade, China tariffs, and the sort of incoherent policy coming out of Washington. Next, we've seen recently the possibility of a global slowdown, which is sort of a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but it's clearly something the market is paying attention to. And then I think the most important thing is interest rates. Historically, interest rate raises have been one of the biggest things to affect the market on a quarterly basis, so it's something we have to keep our eye on.
There have been some extraordinary gyrations in US stock values this year. Swings of 500 points or more from red to green and back again, or the other way around, have been common. In the closing weeks of 2018, it was said you'd have to go back to 1931, 87 years, to find a worse December for the S&P 500.
At some point in the year, almost every sector has been beaten up, from the banks to the retailers to the healthcare, the transports to the housing. But there is one sector that the big board is telling us was particularly badly hit with the volatility of 2018, and that is the FANGs, the big tech stocks that only a year ago were rising so fast.
Santosh Rao monitors FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix and Google, for a living. He says they're on track to end the year far lower than they began.
So FANG stocks are highly volatile, and this is a highly volatile market. So it's very logical that they pull back. And besides that, they have some company-specific issues. Facebook has some privacy issues. Apple has some iPhone issues.
Of course, nothing takes away from the fact that three giant US companies briefly hit $1 trillion in value this year. Apple, Amazon and Microsoft all had market cap valuations bigger than some small countries in 2018. So what may happen in 2019? Peter Tuchman, who's worked at the New York Stock Exchange for over 30 years, says too many unknowns make predictions tough, especially regarding the Trump White House.
So what's going to happen next year? Well, so is this administration done? Are we going to continue the indictments and the attack on what's going on there? And how is that going to affect the markets? That's an unknown. That's a wild card, right? I think our economy, is it going to slow down? I don't kind of get a sense of that. Are they going to pause on the interest rate raises as aggressively as they've been? Probably. What's going to happen with China? I think that will work itself out as long as we don't keep pressing on the gas and the brake at the same time with our policy decisions.
Whatever happens in 2019, it'll be reflected by the numbers in green or red high on the wall of the trading floor. John Terrett, CGTN, at the New York Stock Exchange.
Meanwhile, Chinese stocks saw quite a bearish market in 2018, but a Goldman Sachs report says that China's share market has already reached its bottom and will likely rebound next year. Now, the investment bank based its report on its conclusion that investors already have priced in the worst scenario of China's 2019 economic outlook. Now, the average price-earnings ratio of companies listed on the Shanghai and Shenzhen stock exchanges is at about 10. That's much lower than the long-term average. Analysts are saying that that indicates underestimated share prices and ample room for a rally should any good news hit the market. And moving to Africa now, in Senegal, Chinese businessmen have been in the country to explore investment opportunities. This visit is part of the economic cooperation between the Chinese and Senegalese private sectors. Take a look.
Chinese entrepreneurs, alongside a delegation from the Ministry of Commerce of China, are exploring investment opportunities offered by the Senegalese infrastructure sector. This visit was made possible thanks to the strong cooperation between the two countries.
Cooperation between China and Senegal in the infrastructure sector offers very good prospects. Senegal needs to invest in infrastructure to ensure the foundations for its development. Chinese companies are willing to strengthen their cooperation with Senegalese companies to increase the level of infrastructure construction. In China, it's often said that to develop you first need roads. Once we have developed corporations in the field of infrastructure, all other sectors will follow suit.
In recent years, cooperation between China and Senegal has rapidly increased. Senegalese authorities often highlight the many achievements made by China, a key player in its development, especially in the field of road infrastructure.
We have been able to benefit from significant Chinese investments through the Exim Bank of China, which has already financed 2 flagship highway projects, namely the AIBD Highway to Thiès. Financed by the Exim Bank of China for $400 million, it departs from the Blaise Diagne International Airport and goes to Thiès for one segment, while the other segment goes to Mbour over a distance of 55 kilometers. There is also the other flagship project, the 115-kilometer Thiès-Touba Highway, which is the extension of the AIBD Highway to Touba and costs $690 million. Thus, in the road sector, the government of Senegal is consistently assisted by the People's Republic of China.
In addition to construction, China also finances sports infrastructure, education, agriculture, telecommunications, and many other sectors in Senegal. Currently ranked 140th in the Doing Business ranking, Senegal has the ambition to be one of the 100 most reform-oriented countries in 2019.
We are ready to work with our Chinese counterparts on promising projects, whether it is energy, transport, infrastructure, industry, or in agro-industrial projects. Opportunities are available, and we have a very attractive investment code.
Senegal is set to launch the second phase of its development program called the Plan for an Emerging Senegal. With China as an investor, the country is not worried about achieving this ambitious plan for structural transformation of its economy. Astal, CGTN.
And to the north of Africa now, the president of Egypt has inaugurated the first phase of the country's mega greenhouse project. The project is meant to increase agricultural production to sustain food supply for the fast-growing population in the country. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The Egyptian government is putting a lot of effort on adopting modern cultivation techniques. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi says his country will soon have the second highest number of greenhouse projects in the world. But why this interest in greenhouses?
It saves 40 to 60% more water than traditional cultivation, and it produces 5 times more than normal farming on the same plot of land. The output is high-quality organic food. It guarantees production all year round, not just seasonally, and it also opens the door for other related industries such as packaging.
The first phase, inaugurated by the Egyptian president, includes 7,100 greenhouses over 35,000 acres of land. The total project will cover 100,000 acres and should produce 1.5 million tons a year of agricultural products.
Most of the products are vegetables and fruits like tomatoes, cucumber, beans, green pepper and watermelon. The prices of these products in the market will inevitably go down because of the constant supply.
The projects will help make Egypt self-sufficient in several food items, but will also create revenue for the state.
It will increase exports a lot. Now we export 4.1 million tons a year at $4 billion. Imagine the income we will receive when we produce and export 4 times the quantity.
There were some concerns that adopting modern technology would affect the traditional farmer. Farmers constitute a significant segment of the population.
Traditional farmers should develop themselves. They must learn about greenhouses because it will increase their production by 5 times on the same area of land with lower water consumption. So with less expenses and less effort, they will make more profits. The traditional farmer will benefit if he applies this technology on his land.
Aside from the production value, the first phase of the project alone has also created job opportunities for 75,000 people. China is a major contributor to the greenhouse technology in Egypt. Chinese Sinoma Group has cultivated 12,000 acres out of the 35,000 in the first phase, making it the largest foreign investor in this mega project. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And moving on now, the sharing economy is welcoming a new segment, which is toys. A father of 4 in Singapore began renting toys to others about 3 years ago. Now his business has been expanding and he's been able to generate stable extra income for his family.
Toy stores in Singapore are crowded with kids and parents during the Christmas holidays. But some analysts say that may not last long since the toy sharing business is getting popular. Hu Weiqian, a father with 4 children, has been running a toy sharing platform with his wife for 3 years. They are now earning about 2,000 Singapore dollars or 10,000 yuan every month by loaning toys.
We have grown about 4 times of last year's. So I think that's, you can kind of say that trend is actually getting higher for people to rent toys from us.
Besides ordinary families with kids, Toy Stripe is also targeting party planners, especially during the holidays. But many parents still have doubts about this idea. One of their major concerns is the hygiene of the constantly shared toys. And traditional toy store owners also agree.
If you are sharing a big toy, because that makes sense to me, like maybe a ride-on or one of these, where you can thoroughly, I suppose, scrub it clean with soap. But the small little ones that go in the mouth, I really don't think so.
The global toy market will reach revenues of more than $120 billion by 2023, and that is according to a forecast from market research company Report Buyer. However, analysts say it will take some time before brick-and-mortar stores and toy sharing platforms find a way to cooperate instead of fighting over market share. Lulu, CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, you've probably heard of talks of an ambitious African aviation plan. Well, we'll analyze that and just how 4 African airlines plan to compete with Ethiopian Airlines. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, it's back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news, views and analysis for you here on Africa Live. Here's what's ahead. Surrogacy in Nigeria gains popularity, but few people will openly talk about it. That story and plenty more after the break.
When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Do you see fast-growing, endless deserts and parched earth? Or do you see the biggest opportunity for an agricultural revolution in a generation? Do you see crowded, unplanned cities or vast, untapped markets? Do you see a population at risk, or do you see a billion-strong opportunity to grow the next wave of multi-billion-dollar firms in Africa? When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, social and religious pressure forces many infertile couples to seek ways to avoid the social judgment. Surrogacy is one way out. It is gaining popularity for many Nigerian couples, but the lack of legislation leaves parents and the surrogate vulnerable and open to exploitation. After experiencing fertility challenges, an activist decided to set up an agency in Lagos to help other couples struggling to conceive by using surrogate mothers in Nigeria.
Every morning, Toyin Lolu gets her children ready for school. They are like any other children, except they were born with the help of a surrogate mother in India. Toyin's 12-year struggle with uterine fibroids led her to turn to surrogacy.
Surrogacy is in Nigeria, and once you do it legally, you sign necessary papers, you get a lawyer, you get an agency like ours, we put you through the process. You are safe. And then at the end of the day, when the surrogate gives birth, the hospital hands over the baby to you directly.
In Nigeria, surrogacy is neither authorized nor prohibited. And for Ada, this gap was a rescue. She was given nearly 5,000 euros and accommodation during her pregnancy. At the time, her family was threatened with eviction from their apartment, and it was the only reason her husband accepted the agreement.
I almost gave my life for us to live where we were, because as at that moment, the courts were coming to drive families out of their houses and put their properties on the streets, and I didn't want to even think of that.
In a deeply spiritual and conservative country, infertility is perceived as a divine punishment, and surrogacy is considered taboo and frowned upon, despite existing high demand.
The numbers in the last 2 years have really gone up, and we have not only people who are resident in Nigeria, we have a lot of requests from the Europe, people, Nigerians particularly living in Europe, Nigerians living in the United States.
But not every family has the means to access surrogacy or IVF, and many turn to illegal maternity wards who put unwanted children up for adoption, or worse, for sale. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And we now head to North Africa, where Egyptian waistlines have found their way into the headlines thanks to the president. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has urged citizens to lose weight. A recent study has shown that Egypt has the world's highest rate of obesity, with 35% of adults and 10% of children. Here's Adel Mahrouri with more on what is slowly becoming a weight matter.
A national health campaign in Egypt for non-communicable disease has unraveled shocking numbers in obesity. The health survey, which has investigated around 20 million Egyptians, has shown that 75% of Egyptians are overweight. More than 35% of adult Egyptians and 10% of children are obese, and that 6% are excessively obese. The staggering statistics have urged the Egyptian president to comment.
The criteria you need to make sure your health is good is not necessarily a checkup. Check how much you weigh, how large is your waistline. We are losing our health. It's not just about financial cost. Money can be managed, but nothing can make up for our health.
Egypt has become the highest country in the world with obesity rates.
Unfortunately, Egyptians are not eating a healthy, balanced diet. There is a shortage in their daily intake of vegetables and fruits. Also, there is an overuse of saturated fats in their cooking.
In a country with nearly half of its population under poverty line, animal protein, fruits and vegetables are quite expensive for most people. Popular affordable dishes here are fava bean sandwiches and koshari. Both are very rich in carbohydrates. It's why the president's call for Egyptians to lose weight has seen an uproar on social media.
We need recommendations to make sports a school subject with grades. All parents are concerned to drive their kids to school so they can get good grades, and that's it. No one is teaching sports. When our sons finish high school with weak bodies and they are subject to get back problems and other diseases, are we guaranteeing their future? Of course not. You need a school program that includes sports.
Since his election, President El-Sisi has been keen to appear more than once to the public, biking, an attempt to encourage Egyptians to practice sports and keep fit.
According to the Health Ministry, 84% of Egypt's mortality rates are because of obesity, diabetes and hypertension. Obesity solutions are quite clear. They either need more expenses to abide to certain food diets or more time to engage heavily in sports. But unfortunately, they are necessities not so many Egyptians can afford to spare. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
A fresh survey shows that more and more job seekers in China are becoming interested in short-term employment or doing freelance work. CGTN's Mi Jia talked to a job seeker and headhunters to find out just what's going on.
Jiang Chen is now freelancing as a writer. She quit her last full-time job in August and isn't hurrying to find a new one. She's now taking a few months as a gap, writing for different media outlets and trying out new jobs in art and cultural projects. She says working freelance is a pretty different lifestyle from the life as a full-time employee.
I think going freelance requires a lot of self-control. It's not like working for a company where you have people hurting you to be productive. So when I'm freelancing, time management is flexible, but it's easy to let yourself be distracted.
Jiang is hardly alone. In fact, a survey by human resources company Michael Page showed that more than 96% of the people they interviewed say they would be willing to try a freelance or contract job at some point. 1/5 of the respondents said they would be interested in taking on flexible contract work when facing a career transition, while a similar number said they'd try it if they encountered a glass ceiling in their career. Fortunately enough, all of this is happening just as more and more companies in China are looking to bring in short-term contractors to help kickstart their innovation projects. The companies primarily search for potential freelancers with skills in IT, digital, finance, and human resources.
There are a lot of businesses in China that are trying to be disruptors to the traditional market business models, and to do that you need to invest in skills you wouldn't necessarily have before. And as such, you know, what they're doing is the companies are going and finding these skills, bringing them in, trying new business models, trying new technologies, more innovation, and then through doing that they're able to match their demand.
But going flexible in contracting also comes with risks. For one, the income might not be as stable as it used to be. Jiang Chen says she's prepared for this and is careful when she chooses projects to work with.
The payments for writing come quite late, not monthly, sometimes it's after 3 or 4 months. And if you don't have a financial base, you'll feel the cash flow tightening up. So I usually work with editors who I've worked with before and who I trust. But I'm not hurrying to buy a house or spend a lot of money right now. So if my finances are unstable for a while, that's okay, as long as I'm doing something I like.
That's what the survey results show too. Unstable income is the biggest concern for people going freelance, followed by tight deadlines, an unstable career path, and a break in social security payments that accompany a regular salary. To compensate that, candidates usually ask for a salary premium of from 10 to 30% when they take on a flexible job. It's estimated some 15% of employees in China are now working in freelance or contract positions, as compared to more than 30% in the US and the European Union. Mi Jia, ICIS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. The protests skittle Pakistan to set low victory target in the first test.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way.
Match Point, only on CGTN.
And we begin with cricket, where South Africa are on the edge of the first victory in the first test against Pakistan after a dramatic day on Thursday. Duan Olivier completed his 10-wicket haul with Kagiso Rabada going past his half-century of test wickets, striking 3 times. Dale Steyn took his 50th escape against Pakistan as 15 wickets again fell on the second day. The visitors lost their final 9 wickets for the addition of just 89 runs to leave their bowlers just 148 to defend on the third day. South Africa will require only 149 runs for victory on Friday. And as South Africa edges towards a victory against Pakistan in the series, one player is sitting out the match despite enjoying a successful year. Lungi Ngidi has stood out against Indian, Australian and Zimbabwean sides, but recently suffered a knee injury that will rule him out until February 2019. CGTN CS Du Plessis caught up with the young fast bowler and started by asking him about his injury rehabilitation.
The rehab is going very well. I'm into, I think, my 3rd week now. Moving on to the 4th week, but I say by the 5th week I should be, coming off the short run bowling.
Let's talk about the Otis Gibson impact, because he appears to have made a huge difference to the South African bowling lineup.
I think the relationship between the bowling unit and the head coach is actually amazing at the moment. Our head coach is a bowler as well, so he understands us a lot better than, probably most coaches would. So, the guys also want to impress him every day because, he's been there and he's done it.
What's the best advice that he's given you?
He told me when you relax is when you bowl at your best. So that's been the main thing for me, just calm down and just run in and bowl.
It's been a phenomenal year for you and the team. Fair to say it's been Lungi Ngidi's breakthrough year?
That's, yeah, I've tried as best as I can to put my hand up for selection in pretty much all formats. That's what I've always wanted to do. Test cricket came this year and I really didn't think I was going to get the opportunity, but I did, and that's an opportunity you can never let go.
Any particular series stand out for you?
The 2 test series that we played against India and Australia, that was probably the toughest cricket I've ever played. The skill level of the Indians was unbelievable. The shots that they played, doesn't matter what area you bowl, they're still able to maneuver and, get you away for a boundary. And then the Australians, it was just brutal abuse, They're able to get into your head, and their skill level as well is also it's also up there.
How tough was it playing in Australia after what happened here in South Africa?
I'd heard a lot about the crowd. When we got there, I actually found there were quite a few South Africans in the crowd, so as much abuse as you receive, you're getting just as much praise from the South Africans.
Let's talk about this bowling brotherhood. KG Rabada is in the mix, #1 test bowler in the world, and of course Dale Steyn, the legend. Give us an insight into how this relationship works.
That relationship between the 3 of us it's been great, especially for me, to learn from Dale Steyn and KG, it's helped me fast track my bowling a lot.
Let's talk about the World Cup. There's always pressure going into a World Cup. Is this something that you want to put on that bucket list and get over the line for the first time for South Africa?
I think there's a lot of excitement, a lot of young guys, fearless guys, and I think that's exactly what we need. We're not going there with any doubt of what has happened in the past, and yeah, nothing but the positives in terms of bringing it back, and that's all we're thinking about.
Thank you for watching Africa Live. Uche Okuranko is up next with Global Business Africa. But from me and the team here on Africa Live, bye-bye and happy holidays.